we're going to jump to this category. I just wanted to hear your thoughts because you're really involved with PFL. You know a lot more about the business in that sense than I do with other organizations. People are saying there were some photos of the president of BKFC, bare knuckle fighting, with Dana White. And now people are theorizing that Dana White may be, or the UFC might be buying BKFC. If this did happen, what do you think this would mean for the sport, for combat sports in general?
You know, I saw Dana White and Feldman pictured together. Man, I don't know how this would work. So would they be complete two different entities still, just owned by the same person? Is Feldman still going to run it? Are they still going to have the same matchmakers? Are they going to change? Because a lot of the guys that are retiring from the UFC are going over to BKFC.
Right.
So it's like, how would that work? Do you lose your UFC contract and Dana White says, all right, here's a BKFC contract? But to me, here's the thing. Right now, the BKFC, I mean, I'm not saying that they're competing with the UFC right now, but I tell you what, they've had some incredible matchups that I don't want to miss, that I haven't missed. You got Luke Rockhold coming over, getting his teeth knocked out by Mike Perry. We're talking about the UFC champ, former UFC champ, getting knocked out or getting his teeth knocked out by Mike Perry. We got Eddie Alvarez, former UFC champ. We have Chad Mendez. Like, what does that mean? So if the UFC buys BKFC and now you have the UFC as the owner of both, does that make a BKFC a secondary league comparative to the UFC? Because right now I feel the BKFC in 10 years, like the PFL, is gaining so much popularity. I've been to these BKFC events in Montana, and it is packed. It is sold out. Like, this is like, it's like standing room only. All right. They're doing that great. I'm sorry?
They're fun, man. They're
fun. Next time I go, I'll invite you. I'm friends with Chris Lytle. He's one of the announcers for BKFC. So we go out there and we chop it up with him. We could always have him on the 10-7 to see what he thinks about it as well. With that being said, though, my fear is if the UFC buys BKFC, the BKFC now cannot compete with the UFC. It's always going to be under because the UFC owns them. They're never going to see it. They're never going to be equals businesses. The UFC is always going to be triumph over BKFC because, again, they're going to say, oh, the UFC owns BKFC. So they're always going to get the retired guys. Not that they aren't, not right now. They are still getting that. But I still believe in 10 years, from a popularity standpoint, the BKFC could compete with the UFC.
See, I don't know if I maybe that could be true. I think that's what David Feldman believes, but I kind of just think that because mixed martial arts to me is the purest form of sort of like combat in its purest form, real self-defense, real fighting. And bare knuckle boxing is really interesting. I just don't think it ever, to me, still doesn't feel like a full fight. So I don't know if it'll replace it, but it's an amazing avenue and it works really well, especially with stars that have already been built up by the UFC kind of machine. So it makes sense that it could be owned under the same umbrella. I think it still could be great for fighters. Like, I don't think it'll take away necessarily, maybe a little bit potentially, but I think it could still be a really beautiful kind of like funnel system into the BKFC, maybe after you built up some hype, but it didn't work out in that world and so on and so forth.